The world is watching a trade war unlike any other. In 2025, Donald Trump's re-escalated tariff regime has unleashed economic havoc, targeting Canada with 25% tariffs on critical exports like aluminum, timber, and, most crucially, dairy. Canada, which sends 75% of its $600 billion export market to the U.S., per 2024 Global Affairs Canada data, now faces a chokehold on its economy. These tariffs aren't just numbers. They're a deliberate wedge driven into a 70-year alliance forged through NAFTA and shared borders. The U.S.-Canada relationship, once a model of cooperation, is cracking under pressure. Why this assault? Trump claims Canada's trade practices, particularly its dairy supply management system, unfairly block U.S. farmers. The U.S. dairy industry, valued at $794 billion annually, argues Canada's quotas and tariffs cost American exporters $2 billion yearly per 2024 USDA estimates. Trump's solution? Punish Canada to force open its markets. But this strategy is backfiring spectacularly. Canadian dairy farmers are drowning in surplus milk, with 2025 reports noting a 15% drop in U.S. demand, leading to 12% of Ontario's dairy farms closing since tariffs intensified. Rural communities are hemorrhaging jobs, and farmers face bankruptcy. The ripple effects are brutal. In the U.S., consumers are paying 10% more for dairy products, from cheese to yogurt, as supply chains snarl per 2025 Consumer Price Index data. Canada's retaliatory tariffs, announced in March 2025, target $600 million in U.S. dairy exports, hitting states like Wisconsin and New York hard. This tit-for-tat escalation is a lose-lose game, inflating costs and eroding trust. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau warned in April 2025, "We won't bow to economic coercion," signaling deeper countermeasures that could disrupt $1 trillion in bilateral trade. Yet this chaos masks a deeper truth. The U.S. is alienating its closest ally at a time when global alliances matter most. China, sensing weakness, is stepping in. Not with threats, but with investment. While Trump builds walls, Canada is turning eastward, forging ties that could redefine North America's economic map. The dairy sector, a $15 billion industry in Canada, is ground zero for this shift. Let's unpack how a single factory in Kingston is rewriting the rules amid this tempest. To understand the stakes, let's rewind to a crisis that shook Canada to its core. In 2022, a baby formula shortage exposed Canada's fragile supply chains. Major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal saw shelves stripped bare, with desperate parents driving hours to find formula. Prices skyrocketed 35% per 2022 Statistics Canada data, pushing families into financial distress. Some resorted to unsafe homemade mixtures, risking infant health. This wasn't just a logistical failure. It was a national embarrassment. Canada, a dairy powerhouse producing 10 billion liters of milk annually, had no domestic infant formula production. Every can came from abroad, mostly the U.S., which controlled 80% of North America's formula market, per 2024 industry reports. What caused this vulnerability? Canada's dairy regulations, while protecting farmers, stifled innovation. The CFIA's stringent standards for formula production, requiring years of testing and millions in investment, deterred companies from building local plants. High capital costs, estimated at $380 million minimum, scared off investors, leaving Canada tethered to U.S. suppliers. When U.S. plant closures and FDA recalls hit in 2022, Canada's supply chain collapsed overnight. Parents faced impossible choices, with 20% reporting skipping feedings, per a 2022 Health Canada survey. Fast forward to 2025. Trump's tariffs have poured salt on the wound. U.S. formula exports to Canada, worth $500 million annually, now face 25% levies, driving up costs and sparking fears of another shortage. Canada's dairy surplus, exacerbated by reduced U.S. demand, clogs farms, with 2024 estimates showing 6.8 billion liters of excess milk. The crisis is a perfect storm: regulation, dependence, and trade wars colliding. Canada needed a lifeline, not from its southern neighbor, but from a partner willing to bet big. Enter China's Feihe Group, which saw not just a market gap, but a chance to reshape North America's dairy future. Welcome to Kingston, Ontario, where Canada Royal Milk stands as North America's largest infant formula factory. This $380 million colossus, launched in 2024 by China's Feihe Group, is more than steel and concrete. It's a bold rebuke to trade war chaos. While Trump's tariffs fracture alliances, China and Canada are building a new model of cooperation. This factory, certified by the CFIA in April 2024, is Canada's first to produce infant formula domestically, ending a century of import reliance. It's a revolution in every sense. Let's dive into the scale. The facility churns out enough formula to supply 60% of North America's demand, with a warehouse holding 17,000 pallets, enough to fill a small stadium. Its 14-step production process is a marvel. Raw milk arrives from Ontario farms, undergoes pasteurization and homogenization, then hits a massive spray dryer that transforms it into powder. This tech, 40% more efficient than U.S. counterparts, per 2025 dairy industry studies, sets a global benchmark. By June 2024, formula hit 1,100 stores, Walmart, Loblaws, you name it, with offline sales up 18% monthly and Amazon sales tripling, per 2025 retail analytics. The local impact is seismic. Kingston's economy, once sleepy, is thriving, with 300 jobs created and $60 million in annual spending, per 2025 city records. The factory tackles Canada's milk surplus crisis head-on, processing excess skim milk into formula while diverting cream to other producers. Ontario's dairy farmers, battered by U.S. tariffs, have a new lifeline, with 2025 co-op reports showing a 10% income boost for suppliers. General Manager Han sums it up. This is a we-win project. 8 years ago, Feihe partnered with Kingston's government, seeing a chance to stabilize Canada's market while planting China's flag in North America. Why Feihe? The company dominates globally, holding the #1 spot in infant formula sales for 4 years, per 2024 market data. Its expertise, honed in China's $30 billion formula market, gave it the muscle to navigate Canada's regulatory maze. The CFIA license, a 2-year slog, was a triumph of persistence, unlocking a market desperate for security. Feihe's $380 million bet is paying off, with plans to expand into Mexico and the US by 2026. This isn't just business. It's China outmaneuvering US trade barriers, delivering stability where America sows discord. Zoom out. This is a high-stakes game of nations. Trump's tariffs are more than economics. They're a geopolitical blunder. By punishing Canada, the US is pushing allies into rival orbits. China's $380 million investment in Canada. Royal Milk is a checkmate move, filling the void left by American aggression. In 2023, Canada-China trade surged to $91 billion, up 15% from 2022, per Global Affairs Canada. Dairy is the tip of the spear. China's eyeing Canadian energy, tech, and minerals next. Contrast this with America's self-inflicted wounds. The U.S. dairy industry faces a $700 million hit from Canada's counter-tariffs, per 2025 USDA projections, with exporters in states like California and Vermont reeling. U.S. formula shortages persist, with 2025 FDA data showing 25% stock deficits in major cities. Canada Royal Milk could soon bail out the U.S., with Feihe awaiting FDA approval to supply American shelves by late 2025. The irony is bitter. China, vilified by U.S. rhetoric, may solve America's crisis. This is about vision. China's win-win philosophy, rooted in partnerships with Ontario's dairy co-ops and Kingston's leaders, stands in stark contrast to U.S. isolationism. Canada Royal Milk's tech, like evaporators cutting energy use by 35%, per 2025 engineering reports, is leapfrogging North American standards. Canada gains innovation, China gains influence. The US, meanwhile, risks irrelevance, with 2025 trade forecasts predicting a 5% drop in its North American dairy market share. The stakes are global. China's Belt and Road Initiative echoes here, weaving Canada into a network that bypasses US dominance. Canada's pivot eastward could shift $200 billion in trade flows by 2030, per economic models. Trump's tariffs have lit a fuse, but it's China and Canada diffusing the bomb, building stability one factory at a time. Let's bring this home. For Canadian parents, Canada Royal Milk is a godsend. Formula prices have dropped 12% since 2024, per Statistics Canada, easing budgets strained by inflation. Shortages are history, with 2025 retail surveys showing 98% stock reliability. For Kingston locals like Justin, a factory veteran, it's personal. "This place gave my town a future," he says, pointing to $2 million in community grants for schools and hospitals per 2025 city budgets. The factory's ripple effects are profound. Ontario's dairy farmers, once on the brink, report 15% revenue growth per 2025 co-op data, thanks to Feihe's demand. Women, making up 40% of the factory's workforce, are gaining skills in high-tech manufacturing per 2025 labor studies. This is empowerment, not just economics. Feihe's commitment, rooted in its global leadership, with 6 years as China's top formula brand, ensures quality that parents trust. The future? Feihe's eyeing 80% of North America's formula market by 2027, per industry projections, with Mexico shipments starting in 2026. U.S. expansion hinges on FDA approval, a process fraught with political risks amid U.S.-China tensions. Canada's dairy quotas, capping milk supply, could also bottleneck growth, with 2025 policy debates looming. Yet this factory's success proves collaboration trumps chaos. It's a model for a world desperate for unity. The lesson is clear. Nations thrive together or fall apart. Canada Royal Milk isn't just feeding babies, it's feeding hope for a fractured planet. The trade war ignited by Donald Trump's tariffs isn't just fracturing US-Canada ties, it's squeezing the world's second-largest economy, China. In the first quarter of 2025, China's GDP growth slowed to 5.1%, down from 5.4% in late 2024, with forecasts predicting a further dip to 4.5% for the year, missing Beijing's ambitious 5% target per a Reuters poll of 57 economists. Trump's escalating tariffs, some as high as 60% on Chinese goods, are a sledgehammer to China's export-driven economy, already battered by a post-COVID slump, a property crisis, and deflation. This isn't just China's fight, it's a global economic tremor, and Canada's dairy venture with China is caught in the crossfire. Let's unpack the damage. China's exports to the US, worth $400 billion annually, face crippling duties, forcing factories to idle and unsold goods to pile up. Consumer prices in China fell for 2 straight months in March 2025, with factory gate deflation worsening, signaling weak demand at home and abroad. China's retaliatory tariffs, now at 125% on US goods, are a desperate counterpunch, but they risk escalating a prolonged trade war that could shave 1% off China's GDP, per Moody's 2025 estimates. For Canada Royal Milk, this is a double-edged sword. The Kingston factory, a $380 million bet by China's Feihe Group, relies on stable trade flows to expand into US and Mexican markets. Rising US-China tensions threaten FDA approvals and supply chains, potentially stalling Feihe's North American ambitions. Yet, China's not standing still. Beijing is doubling down on win-win partnerships, like the one with Canada, to hedge against US hostility. In 2024, China-Canada trade hit $110 billion, up 15% from 2022, with dairy as a flagship success. Canada Royal Milk processes Ontario's surplus milk, 1.2 billion litres in 2025, into formula, stabilizing Canada's dairy sector while giving China a foothold in North America. This factory's high-tech spray dryers, 40% more efficient than US models, showcase China's edge, but its success hinges on navigating a trade minefield. China's courting the EU too, with 2025 trade talks aiming to offset U.S. losses, per Reuters. If Trump's tariffs persist, Canada could become China's gateway to the West, reshaping global alliances. Contrast this with the U.S.-America's dairy industry is bleeding, with Canada's counter tariffs costing U.S. exporters $700 million in 2025 per USDA projections. U.S. formula shortages, hitting 25% in major cities, underscore the irony. China's Kingston factory could soon supply American shelves, pending regulatory green lights. The trade war's chaos is rewriting power dynamics, with China and Canada outmaneuvering a self-sabotaging U.S. But risks loom. China's domestic woes, like rising unemployment and a property market dragging 70% of household savings, could limit Feihe's investment muscle, threatening projects like Kingston. This is a high-stakes gamble, where dairy is just one piece of a fracturing global puzzle. The trade war's shockwaves aren't confined to North America or Asia. They're slamming Europe, with Germany, the EU's economic engine, caught in Trump's tariff crosshairs. In 2025, U.S. tariffs of 20% loom over German goods, from Birkenstock sandals to beer and Riesling wine, threatening a $277 billion trade relationship, per 2024 German trade data. This isn't just about luxury goods, it's a dairy disaster in the making, with ripple effects for Canada's China-backed factory. Trump's policies are pitting allies against each other, and the fallout could reshape Kingston's role in global markets. Here's the stakes. The U.S. is Germany's top trading partner, with $63 million in German wine exports and $200 million in beer sales at risk, per 2025 German Wine Association figures. Dairy, a $5 billion German export sector, faces price hikes, with cheeses and milk powders hit by duties that could raise U.S. retail costs 15%, per industry forecasts. Germany's economy, already teetering on a third year of recession, can't afford this. Economists warn tariffs could wipe out 1% of Germany's GDP, per 2025 ECB estimates, deepening unemployment and factory closures. For consumers, it's a bitter pill. Think $350 Birkenstocks or $10 pints of Polliner, as companies like Birkenstock plan to pass costs to shoppers, per Reuters. How does this tie to Canada Royal Milk? Germany's dairy woes amplify Kingston's strategic edge. Canada's factory, producing 60% of North America's formula demand, is poised to fill gaps left by pricier European imports. In 2025, Canada Royal Milk's formula sales grew 18% monthly, with Amazon sales tripling, per retail data, as U.S. retailers seek tariff-free alternatives. Feihe's $380 million facility, certified by CFIA in April 2024, offers stability that German producers can't match under Trump's trade assault. Ontario's 300 dairy co-ops, supplying Kingston, report 15% revenue gains, per 2025 figures, as surplus milk finds a purpose, unlike Germany's stalled exports. But it's not all rosy. Trump's tariffs on Canada, 25% on dairy, still sting, raising costs for cross-border formula shipments. Germany's plight could spur EU-Canada trade talks, with CETA, Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, volumes up 10% in 2025, per EU trade reports. If Canada leverages Kingston's output to supply Europe, Feihe could pivot from U.S. expansion to EU markets, sidestepping FDA delays. This is where China's vision shines. General Manager Han's "We Win" ethos, rooted in partnerships with Kingston's government since 2016, contrasts with Europe's scramble to dodge U.S. duties. Germany's loss could be Canada's gain, but only if trade wars don't spiral further. On the ground, Kingston thrives, with 350 local jobs and $65 million in 2025 spending, per city records. Parents across Canada, spared the 35% price spikes of 2022's shortage, now pay 12% less for formula, per Statistics Canada. Germany's dairy farmers, facing 20% export drops, envy this stability. The future hinges on negotiation. A 90-day U.S. tariff pause offers hope, but Trump's unpredictability keeps markets on edge, per 2025 ECB analysis. Canada Royal Milk stands as a beacon of resilience, proving that amid tariff chaos, collaboration can carve a path forward if nations dare to take it. We're in uncharted waters. Trump's trade war has exposed the fragility of global ties, but it's also sparked innovation. Canada Royal Milk is a beacon, a Chinese-Canadian triumph amid U.S. missteps. As a father, I see hope in every can of formula. As a storyteller, I see a lesson. Division breeds loss. Collaboration breeds progress.